Hey guys! Tonight we slip into the hushed glow of a Victorian bridal chamber, where the air smells of beeswax and rose water, and a four-poster bed looms under flickering candlelight. Picture yourself standing on a polished floor, your silk nightgown, brushing your ankles, as the distant chime of a church bell signals midnight. You're here to uncover why Victorian ladies feared their wedding nights. A moment of romance shrouded in dread, mystery, and unspoken rules. Trust me, you probably wouldn't survive the corset-tight nerves, let alone the secrets whispered behind those velvet curtains. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in this chamber, and the first thing that hits you is the weight of the air. Mid-19th century Britain, a time of empire, etiquette, and expectations that squeezed women like a vice. The wedding night wasn't just a private milestone. It was a public performance, a test of virtue, duty, and survival in a society obsessed with propriety. You're a young bride, maybe 20, your heart pounding as you await your new husband, let's call him Charles, whose footsteps echo beyond the door. Fear isn't just about him. It's about everything: the unknown, the pain, the judgment waiting at dawn. You're here to peel back the layers of this dread, starting with the world that shaped it, a maze of rules and silence. Let's ground this with a mainstream fact. Victorian society placed immense pressure on women to be pure and ignorant before marriage, with wedding nights seen as a sacred but daunting duty, as noted in conduct manuals like the Etiquette of Courtship and Matrimony, 1852. You were expected to be a virgin, untouched and uninformed, entering the bedroom with no knowledge beyond vague hints from mothers or maids. You're clutching a lace handkerchief, the candlelight trembling like your nerves, and you're realizing nobody's told you what happens next. The marriage contract, sealed with vows, demands you fulfill wifely duties, but the details are a fog. And that ignorance is the root of your fear, a shadow looming larger than the bed itself. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides carried wedding charms, tiny silver lockets with herbs like lavender or rosemary, believed to calm nerves or ensure fertility. In the 1860s, jewelers' catalogs sold these as bridal gifts, tucked into bouquets or sewn into gowns. You're fingering one now. It's metal cool against your palm, and grinning. It's like a Victorian fidget spinner, meant to soothe but no match for the panic rising in your chest. You're half tempted to pop it open, hoping for magic. But the charm's just a trinket, a frail shield against the night's weight, like those laudanum vials we saw soothing other fears. But not everyone agrees on the source of this dread. Historians still argue whether Victorian brides feared their wedding nights due to personal ignorance or broader societal pressures, with no single cause in diaries or etiquette books. Some, citing letters, say it was the lack of sexual knowledge that terrified. Others, pointing to cultural norms, argue it was the expectation of submission and scrutiny that loomed larger. You're standing by the bed, its embroidered coverlet pristine, and wondering which cuts deeper: the mystery of Charles's touch, or the world watching your every move. The parlor's expectations we felt, now a noose around your heart. Step closer to the window and notice the details. The cool glass under your fingers, the faint creak of the floorboards, the way the candle's flame sways like your resolve. This chamber's your stage, a private space that feels anything but Tied to the London streets we walked, where society's rules were law. You're feeling the paradox. You're a bride, celebrated today with flowers and toasts, but also a pawn, expected to perform a role nobody explained. The fear's not just physical, it's emotional, social, a tangle of duty and dread. You're thinking of that handkerchief, how it's for tears you can't shed, and the charm, a useless token against a night that's both sacred and terrifying. Time for a quick joke. Why did the bride clutch her locket? Because it was braver than she was. You're chuckling, but it's soft. The footsteps outside grow louder, and you're bracing for Charles's knock. You're catching the room's hush, a maid's shadow passing the door, and sensing the stakes. The wedding night's a threshold, not just to marriage but to a life where your body, your heart, belong to others. Charles, society, the church. You're wondering about the woman who slept here last, if she trembled like you, or if she found courage in the dark. The fear's real, rooted in a world that demands everything but explains nothing. As you linger by the window, you're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just one night, it's a symbol of Victorian womanhood, where love was duty and fear was part of the bargain. You're thinking of those wedding charms, hiding nerves like laudanum hid pain, and how they mirror the secrets brides kept. The court's rules, the silence around sex, the weight of being pure, they're all here, in this chamber, pressing on your chest. You're wondering about other brides, spinsters turned wives, girls barely 18, their fears like yours, a shared thread in England's tapestry. The candle burns low, Charles's knock echoes, and you're ready to step deeper into this world, chasing the pressures that made this night a trial. One last chuckle. Why was the bridal chamber so quiet? Because it knew more than the bride did. You're turning from the window, the locket slipping from your fingers as the door creaks open. With wedding night fears heavy in your heart, you're ready to explore the societal expectations that fueled them, a web of rules tightening around you. You're stepping out of that candlelit bridal chamber, the locket's weight still in your pocket, and into the bustling parlor of a London townhouse, where the air smells of polished mahogany and the faint rose water of ladies' perfumes. Crystal glasses clink as guests toast your engagement, their smiles sharp under gaslight chandeliers. It's the 1860s, and you're a Victorian bride-to-be, maybe 20. Your crinoline swishing as you nod through congratulations, heart thudding with the wedding night's looming shadow. The chatter's bright, but you're drowning in society's rigid expectations. The unspoken rules that make marriage and its intimates start a test you dread. You're here to explore the pressures fueling this fear, the social code that bound women to roles and judgments, tightening like a corset around your wedding night. This is the Victorian world's grip, and you're feeling its squeeze, sharp as the glances pinning you in place. The mainstream fact is that Victorian society imposed strict gender roles on women, demanding they be pure, submissive, and domestic, with marriage as their ultimate duty, as outlined in conduct manuals like the Young Lady's Friend 1864. Your job was to be an angel in the house, a moral wife serving husband and family, with the wedding night sealing this contract. Through consummation, you're smiling at a guest, Charles's aunt, her eyes assessing, but you're panicking inside, knowing the bedroom's not just about love, it's about proving your worth, your virtue, your ability to bear heirs. Failure, or even hesitation, risks shame, gossip, or worse, in a world where your value hinges on this night's success. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides received marriage manuals as gifts, discreet booklets hidden in velvet pouches, offering vague advice on wifely duties with coded phrases like yielding gracefully. In the 1860s, publishers quietly sold these, often slipped into trossos by ants. You're imagining one tucked in your luggage, its pages unreadable, in your panic, and grinning it's like a Victorian IKEA manual. But for something way scarier than furniture. You're half tempted to sneak a peek, but the ant's stare keeps you frozen. Her not a reminder of the role you're expected to play, locket or no locket from that chamber. Historians still argue whether these expectations empowered women within marriage or crushed them under obligation, with no clear consensus in letters or etiquette guides. Some, citing diaries, say the angel role gave you influence over family morals. Others, noting divorce court records, argue it trapped you in submission, with the wedding night a symbol of lost autonomy. You're weaving through guests, their toasts ringing, and wondering if you're stepping into power or a cage. The fear we felt in the bedroom, now a knot tied by society's rules. Each smile a demand to perform perfectly, a time for a quick joke. Why did the bride's smile wobble? Because society's rules were heavier than her veil. You're chuckling, but its soft a guest's raised eyebrow stifles it. And you're dodging a tray of sherry. You're clutching your fan, its flutter a shield, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The parlor's alive with velvet gowns and starched collars. A piano tinkling in the corner, but it's a stage. Every gesture watched. You're not. In that bridal chamber with its looming bed or the doctor's office we'll visit later. You're in society's heart, where expectations are law. You're to be Charles's wife, running his home, bearing his children, all while staying pure, poised, and silent about the bedroom's mysteries. The wedding night's your first test. Consummation proves your duty, but nobody's explained how. Like we felt in that chamber's hush, you're feeling the pressure, a vice of propriety, where a misstep, fear, pain, or refusal could brand you frigid or unfit, whispers spreading faster than the sherry's poured. Step closer to the fireplace and notice the details. The warm crackle of logs, the faint clink of glasses, the way your fan's lace trembles in your grip. This parlor's a mirror, like those wedding charms soothing nerves. But it's public, unforgiving. You're thinking of that locket, a frail defense against fear, and how it ties to the expectations here: virginity, fertility, obedience, all demanded without question. Society's rules, like the corset we'll feel later, bind you to Charles's will, to heirs, to a role where your body's not yours. You're wondering why nobody talks about the pain, the fear, only the joy of marriage. Their silence a wall you can't climb, like the ignorance we'll face next. Here's another chuckle. Why was the parlor so chatty? Because it gossiped, louder than the bride's nerves. You're smiling, but it's strained. Charles's aunt is asking about your trousseau, and you're dodging with a nod. You're also connecting the bedroom's dread. That moment we stood trembling stems from this parlor, where society scripts your life. You're remembering the laudanum vials we saw, how women numbed other pains, and wondering if brides used them for this night. A secret to survive the rules. You're thinking of other women debutantes, spinsters forced to wed their fears like yours. Shaped by a world that celebrates the ring but not the woman wearing it. As you slip toward the door, the aunt's voice fading, you're craving air, the parlor's warmth now stifling. Its expectations a weight you can't shake. You're starting to see the bigger picture. These pressures aren't just social, they're a system, making the wedding night a trial where fear's the price of duty. You're thinking of those marriage manuals, hiding truth like society hides your voice, and how they bind you to a role that's more prison than partnership. You're wondering about the bride you'll be, if you'll face Charles with courage, or collapse under the rules and the women who've stood here before. Their stories lost in the chatter. The gaslight dims, the street beckons, and you're carrying this heavy code, ready to uncover the ignorance that fueled your dread, a silence louder than the toasts. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did expectations love the bride? Because she was easier to mold than her gown. You're stepping outside, the parlor's glow fading, as the night's chill wraps you, with society's expectations heavy on your shoulders. You're ready to explore the ignorance that made the wedding night a mystery, a void where fear took root. You're hurrying through the foggy streets of London, the damp cobblestones slick under your boots, as the air smells of coal smoke and the faint sweetness of a baker's cart nearby. Gaslights cast hazy pools, and you're a Victorian bride-to-be, maybe 21, your bonnet shielding you from curious glances as you clutch a letter from your mother. It's vague advice about marital duties doing little to calm your nerves. The parlor's toasts and society's rules still echo, but now you're grappling with the ignorance that fuels your wedding night fears. The silence around sex that leaves you unprepared for what awaits. With Charles, you're here to uncover the lack of sexual education for Victorian brides, a void where whispers and warnings replace knowledge, making the bedroom a mystery. This is the fog of unknowing, and you're feeling its chill, sharp as the mist curling around you. The mainstream fact is that Victorian women, particularly young brides, received little to no sexual education before marriage, as noted in social histories and women's diaries from the 1860s. Society prized female purity, demanding ignorance as proof of virtue, with mothers or aunts offering only cryptic hints about submitting to husbands, leaving you clueless about intimacy. You're rereading the letter, its lines about pleasing Charles and enduring the first night maddeningly vague, and you're frustrated, heart racing as you imagine that bridal chamber we stood in. It's but a puzzle you can't solve. The absence of knowledge isn't just embarrassing, it's terrifying. A gap that society expects you to cross blindfolded. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides sought advice from ladies' almanacs, cheap pamphlets sold under the counter, with veiled tips on conjugal relations hidden among recipes and sewing patterns. In the 1860s, stationers' records show these discreet booklets, passed in secret like contraband. You're picturing one stuffed in your reticule, its pages promising answers but delivering riddles, and grinning it's like a Victorian Reddit thread, but with more embroidery tips. You're half tempted to hunt for one at the newsstand you're passing, but the letters wait and the street's eyes keep you moving. The ignorance a heavier burden than your shawl. Historians still argue whether this lack of education was deliberate to control women or a byproduct of cultural prudery, with no clear intent in family correspondence or etiquette guides. Some, citing conduct manuals, say it was engineered to enforce submission, keeping you dependent on husbands. Others, noting the era's repression, argue it was a societal blind spot, with even mothers too embarrassed to speak. You're dodging a muddy puddle, the letter crinkling, and wondering if your mother's silence is meant to protect you or trap you. The wedding night's dread we felt in the chamber, now a fire fed by this void, the rules from the parlor tightening their grip. Time for a quick joke. Why was the bride's letter so vague? Because it was scared of blushing too. You're chuckling, but it's quiet, a hawker's shout drowns it, and you're wary of a passing constable's glance. You're tucking the letter away, the fog dampening your bonnet as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The streets a blur of top hats and hoop skirts, with shop signs creaking and a horse cart rumbling past, its driver cursing the fog. You're not in that parlor with its judging toasts or the bridal chamber's looming bed. You're in a public maze where ignorance is your only guide. You're expected to enter marriage pure, as society demanded we saw. But nobody's taught you what that bed entails: pain, pleasure, or something else. You're feeling the frustration, like a book with missing pages, because the wedding night's a test you can't study for. Your mother's letter, all duty and patience, is no help. And you're piecing together scrap skiggles from cousins, a maid's hushed warning about discomfort, hoping they're enough. But they're not, and the fear grows. A shadow in the fog. Step closer to a gaslight and notice the details. The warm glow on your gloved hand, the faint drip of water from an awning, the way the letters wax seal cracks under your thumb. This street's your world, like those wedding charms we clutch for courage. But it's isolating, offering no answers. You're thinking of that parlor's expectations, how they demand you be a perfect wife, and how this ignorance serves them, keeping you docile, dependent, like a child in that chamber. You're wondering why sex is a secret, why mothers whisper but don't speak. Their silence a wall between you and safety. You're craving clarity, but all you have is fear, fed by the void, the same dread that drove some to laudanum vials. We saw a numbing escape you're tempted by now. Here's another chuckle. Why was the almanac so coy? Because it knew less than the bedroom curtains. You're smiling, but its strained a street urchin's stare makes you pull your shawl tighter. You're also connecting the parlor's rules. That angel in the house myth set the stage. This ignorance is the script, making the wedding night a blind leap, like we felt trembling by the bed. You're remembering those marriage manuals from the parlor, as vague as your mother's letter, and wondering if they're deliberate, a way to keep you in the dark, like the fog. Round you, you're thinking of other brides, girls in mansions, maids forced to wed their ignorance like yours. A shared silence fueling their fears. Each step toward the altar a step into the unknown. As you turn toward home, the fog thickening, you're clutching the letter, its useless words a reminder of the knowledge you don't have. The wedding night's shadow growing with every step. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just a personal gap, it's a societal one, where ignorance was a tool to bind women, making the bedroom a place of fear, not love. You're thinking of those ladies' almanacs, hiding truth like society hides your voice, and how they reflect a world that values purity over power. You're wondering about the bride you'll be, if you'll face Charles with guesses or collapse under the silence. And the women who've walked this street before, their fears unanswered. The gaslight dims, the fog closes in, and you're carrying this heavy void, ready to delve into the medical myths that deepened your dread. A science as murky as the night. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did ignorance love the bride? Because it kept her guessing longer than Charles. You're slipping through the fog, the letter tucked close, as the street's hum fades. With the ignorance fueling your fears heavy in your heart, you're ready to explore the medical myths that made the wedding night a mystery, a tangle of lies and dread. You're seated in the stuffy consulting room of a London physician, the air heavy with the scent of carbolic acid and the faint must of leather-bound medical books. Stacked on a cluttered desk, a gas lamp flickers, casting shadows on anatomical charts pinned to the walls, and you're a Victorian bride-to-be, maybe 22. Your gloved hands twisting a handkerchief as the doctor, all whiskers and grave nods, lectures on female health. Your mother's cryptic letter, clutched on that foggy street, led you here, seeking answers about the wedding night. But his words' vague warnings about delicate organs only deepen your dread. You're here to delve into the bizarre, Medical myths that made Victorian brides fear their first night with husbands like Charles. Pseudoscience that turned intimacy into a maze of danger and shame. This is the fog of quackery, and you're feeling its chill, sharp as the doctor's probing stare. The mainstream fact is that Victorian medicine often misunderstood female sexuality, promoting myths about women's bodies that fueled fears about the wedding night, as documented in texts like The Functions and Disorders of the Reproductive Organs. 1857 by William Acton. Doctors claimed women lacked sexual desire, viewing the act as a duty for procreation, with any discomfort or resistance labeled as pathological. You're listening to the doctor warn that overexertion on your wedding night could unbalance your womb, and you're wincing. The ignorance we felt on the street now cloaked in science, making the bridal chamber's bed we trembled in seem like a battlefield, not a haven. His advice: rest, restraint, laudanum if needed, offers no clarity, only more dread. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some doctors prescribed bridal tonics, herbal brews with rose hips or valerian, to fortify brides for their wedding night, believing they strengthened fragile nerves. In the 1860s, apothecary ads touted these as essential for delicate ladies. You're picturing a vial of this pinkish sludge on his desk, and grinning it's like a Victorian Red Bull, but for surviving Charles's embrace. You're half tempted to ask for a sample, hoping it's less bitter than laudanum we saw. But his stern tone, droning about hysterical tendencies, keeps you silent. The myths piling up like the books around you. Historians still argue whether these medical myths were deliberate tools to control women, or honest errors born of limited science, with no clear intent in medical journals or case studies. Some, citing Acton's texts, say they reinforced patriarchal norms, pathologizing women's autonomy. Others, noting the era's crude anatomy, argue doctors genuinely believed their theories, unaware of their harm. You're gripping the handkerchief, the doctor's words blurring, and wondering if he's caging you or just clueless. The wedding night's fear we felt in the chamber, now a monster fed by this pseudoscience. The parlor's expectations tightening their grip. Time for a quick joke. Why did the doctor's tonic taste so bad? Because it was brewed with fear, not roses. You're chuckling, but it's hushed. His quill's scratch drowns it, and you're wary of his disapproving glance. You're shifting in the chair, the crinoline's hoops digging in, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The consulting room's oppressive, with a skeleton model in the corner, jars of murky liquids on a shelf, and a chart mapping a womb, like a foreign land. You're not on that foggy street with its silent letter, or in the parlor's judging toasts. You're in a space of supposed knowledge, where myths pass for truth. The doctors spiel women's bodies as fragile, sex as taxing, pleasure as unnatural. Makes your stomach churn, because it's not just advice. It's a verdict, echoing the ignorance we faced, turning the wedding night into a medical ordeal. You're feeling the betrayal, how you came for answers but got warnings. Each word a brick in a wall between you and understanding, like the letters. Riddles we read. Step closer to the desk and notice the details. The cool brass of an inkstand, the faint whiff of ether from a bottle, the way the chart's ink lines twist like your nerves. This room's a stage, like those ladies' almanacs we hoped for on the street. But it's deceptive, dressing lies in science. You're thinking of that bridal chamber, how its fear was rooted in this ignorance, and the parlor's rules, demanding purity without knowledge. The myth swarms wandering, nerves fraying make intimacy a danger, not a bond, and you're wondering why your body's a mystery even to you. The doctor's words as useless as that wedding charm we clutched. You're craving truth, but all you get is fear, a shadow growing with each delicate warning, tempting you toward laudanum's haze we saw. Here's another chuckle. Why was the doctor's chart so wrong? Because it mapped WAMs but missed the point. You're smiling, but it's bitter. His lecture on restraint feels like a scold. And you're thinking of escape. You're also connecting the street's silence, the parlor's expectations. They've led here, where medical myths deepen the wedding night's dread we felt trembling by the bed. You're remembering those marriage manuals, as vague as this doctor, and how they align with his nonsense, keeping you in the dark to serve society's rules. You're thinking of other brides, debutantes, seamstresses, their fears fed by these lies, their bodies misunderstood. Each visit to a doctor like this a step toward panic, not peace. As you rise from the chair, the doctor's voice fading, you're craving air, the room's stuffiness mirroring the myths choking your mind. His prescription for calm, another veil over truth. You're starting to see the bigger picture. These myths weren't just errors, they were a system, making the wedding night a gauntlet by framing women's bodies as frail, their desires as flaws. You're thinking of those bridal tonics, masking fear like laudanum masked pain, and how they reflect a society that prefers control over clarity. You're wondering about the bride you'll be, if you'll face Charles with these lies or seek your own truth. And the women who've sat here before, their dread unanswered. The gaslight dims, the street awaits, and you're carrying this murky science, ready to navigate the husband's power that loomed over the night. A legal shadow as dark as the myths. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did myths love the wedding night? Because they scared brides better than ghosts. You're slipping from the room. The handkerchief crumpled as the door clicks shut, with medical myths heavy in your heart. You're ready to explore the husband's unchecked power, the rites that made the wedding night a trial. You're pacing the creaky floorboards of your family's modest drawing room, the air tinged with the scent of coal dust, and the faint lavender of your mother's sachets tucked into the sofa. A single gas lamp flickers, casting long shadows on faded wallpaper, and you're a Victorian bride-to-be, maybe 23. Your engagement ring heavy as you twist it, the doctor's medical myths still ringing in your ears. Outside, the London night hums with distant carriages, but inside, your thoughts are on Charles, your soon-to-be husband, and the power he'll hold over you after the vows. You're here to navigate the husband's unchecked power, the legal and social rights that made Victorian wedding nights a source of fear, turning intimacy into a duty you can't refuse. This is the weight of marital law, and you're feeling its grip, tight as the corset you'll wear to the altar. The mainstream fact is that Victorian marriage laws, particularly under the Matrimonial Causes Act of 1857, gave husbands near total control over their wives, including unrestricted conjugal rights, as detailed in legal texts and court records. Once married, you had no legal right to refuse Charles's advances. His access to your body was enshrined, with non-compliance grounds, for annulment or accusations of cruelty. You're glancing at a framed sampler on the wall, its stitched honor and obey mocking your nerves. And you're realizing the wedding night we trembled for in that chamber isn't just a private act, it's a legal obligation, enforced by the society we felt in the parlor, where your role as wife trumps your will. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some husbands gifted bridal keys, ornate iron keys symbolizing their authority over the household, presented on the wedding night as a ritual of ownership. In the 1860s, silversmiths' catalogs offered these, engraved with hearts or vows. You're imagining Charles handing you one, its cold weight a claim on your body, and grinning grimly. It's like a Victorian housewarming gift, but for your autonomy. You're half tempted to fling it into the fire, but the sampler's words and the doctor's myths about delicate wombs keep you still. The power imbalance as real as the ring on your finger. Historians still argue whether husband's power was absolute or tempered by social norms, with no clear consensus in legal cases or diaries. Some, citing court rulings, say men exploited their rights with impunity, especially in the bedroom. Others, noting love letters, argue mutual affection or moral pressure softened their control, giving you some leverage. You're pacing faster, the floor creaking, and wondering if Charles will be kind or claim his rights like a lord. The ignorance we faced on the street and the medical myths we heard weaving a net, where his power feels like a sentence. The wedding night a trial you can't escape. Time for a quick joke. Why was the bridal key so heavy? Because it locked more than just the door. You're chuckling, but it's soft. The lamp's flicker feels judgmental, and you're wary of your mother's footsteps upstairs. You're pausing by the fireplace, its embers low. As you take in the scene, picture the scene. The drawing room small but stiff, with a chipped teapot on a side table, a worn Bible by the sofa, and the sampler glaring like a contract. You're not in that doctor's office with its womb charts or the foggy street silence. You're in a domestic cage, where Charles's power looms larger than the wedding night itself. The law says your body's his on that night and every night after making the bed. We saw a place of obligation, not love. You're feeling the injustice. How society's rules from the parlor and the doctor's myths from the consulting room justify this, framing you as delicate to be claimed, not cherished. You're wondering what consent means when the law, the church, and Charles all say you owe him. The fear we felt by the bed, now a legal chain. Step closer to the sampler and notice the details. The rough thread under your fingers, the faint tick of a clock, the way the lamp's light makes the stitches gleam like a warning. This room's your reality, like those ladies' almanacs we hoped for. But it's suffocating, echoing the ignorance that left you unprepared. You're thinking of that wedding charm, a frail token against dread, and how it's useless against Charles's rights, backed by laws that see you as property. You're wondering why your mother never warned you, if she feared her own wedding night. Her silence part of the system that gives Charles this power, like the medical myths that called your body a risk. You're craving defiance, but the law's a wall, and you're trapped. The laudanum vials we saw tempting as a way to blur this truth. Here's another chuckle. Why did the husband love his key? Because it opened more than his wife's heart. You're smiling, but it's bitter. The Bible's pages flutter in a draft, and you're thinking of escape. You're also connecting the dots, the street's ignorance, the parlor's expectations, the doctor's lies they've led here, where Charles's power is the wedding night's true terror. Not just the act, but the ownership it seals, like we felt trembling in the chamber. You're remembering those marriage manuals, vague as the law's mercy, and how they align with this system, teaching submission, not partnership. You're thinking of other brides, wealthy heiresses, factory girls, their wedding nights under the same law, their fears like yours, each vow a surrender to a man's right, not a shared promise. As you sink onto the sofa, the sampler's words blurring, you're aching for a way out. The drawing room's warmth now a prison, Charles's power a shadow you can't outrun. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about one night, it's about a society that gave men the keys, making the wedding night a legal claim, not a choice. You're thinking of those bridal keys, symbols of control like laudanum was of escape, and how they reflect a world that binds women to duty over desire. You're wondering about the wife you'll be, if you'll bend to Charles's rights or find a crack in the law's wall. And the women who've faced this before, their courage hidden. The lamp dims, the night presses in, and you're carrying this heavy power, ready to face the painful first encounters that loomed in the bedroom. A physical fear born of law and lies. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the law so cruel? Because it loved husbands more than brides. You're rising from the sofa, the letter left behind. As the room's hush deepens, with husband's power heavy in your soul, you're ready to witness the physical fears of the wedding night, the pain that made it a trial. You're back in that candlelit bridal chamber, the one where we first felt your trembling dread. But now the door's creaking open, and Charles's shadow fills the frame. His boots heavy on the polished floor. The air's thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint rosewater of your wedding bouquet, wilting on a side table. It's the 1860s, and you're a Victorian bride, maybe 23. Your silk nightgown clinging as you stand frozen by the four-poster bed, heart pounding like a trapped bird. The weight of Charles's legal power, that iron grip we felt in the drawing room, looms larger now. But it's the physical reality of this night pain, uncertainty, the act itself that's sharpening your fear. You're here to witness the physical fears of consummation. The bodily unknowns that made Victorian wedding nights a trial for brides like you, steeped in ignorance and myth. This is the moment of truth, and you're feeling its edge, raw as the candle's wavering flame. The mainstream fact is that Victorian brides often feared the physical pain of their wedding night, due to their lack of sexual knowledge and the era's medical misconceptions, as noted in women's diaries and medical texts from the 1860s. Without education, like we saw on that foggy street, you expected discomfort or worse, based on whispered warnings of endurance or the doctors. Myths about delicate wombs we heard in the consulting room. You're clutching the bedpost, Charles's gaze heavy, and you're bracing for pain you can't name. The act of mystery that society, with its parlor rules we navigated, insists you perform, no matter the cost to your body or heart. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides were given bridal pillows, small cushions stuffed with chamomile or lavender, meant to ease tension during the wedding night's ordeal. In the 1860s, seamstresses' catalogs offered these, embroidered with doves for calm. You're picturing one on the bed, its scent faint, and grinning. It's like a Victorian stress ball, as useless as that wedding charm we held in this room. You're half tempted to hug it, hoping it'll dull the ache in your chest. But Charles's step closer snaps you back. The myths and ignorance we've carried making this moment a gauntlet, not a gift. Historians still argue whether the physical fears were universal or varied by individual experience, with no clear pattern in personal accounts or medical advice. Some, citing diaries, say most brides dreaded pain due to cultural silence and anatomical ignorance. Others, noting rare love matches, argue some felt curiosity or trust, easing their fears. You're gripping the bedpost tighter, Charles's voice soft but insistent, and wondering if you're alone in this panic or if love could have softened it. The societal pressures from the parlor and the doctor's warnings we heard piling dread on your body. The wedding night attests you're not sure you can pass. Time for a quick joke. Why was the bridal pillow so fluffy? Because it had to cushion more than just your head. You're chuckling, but it's barely a whisper. Charles's hand on the curtain stifles it, and you're wary of his frown. You're inching toward the bed, its coverlet cold, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene, the chamber's intimate but oppressive, with velvet curtains drawn, a silver mirror reflecting your pale face, and the bed's canopy looming like a judge. You're not in the drawing room with its legal chains or the doctor's office with its womb myths. You're in the heart of fear, where the physical act awaits, unknown and unavoidable. Charles, in his nightshirt, isn't cruel, but his presence backed by the law we felt feels like a claim, not a partnership. You're expecting pain, maybe bleeding, based on a cousin's tearful whisper or the doctor's talk of fragile bodies, and you're terrified. The ignorance from the street and the parlor's rules leaving you defenseless. Like a knight without armor in that bed we first saw. Step closer to the mirror and notice the details. The cool glass under your trembling fingers, the faint creak of Charles's boots, the way the candle's flame dances like your pulse. This chamber's a crucible, like those ladies' almanacs we sought, but it's visceral, where myths meet flesh. You're thinking of that doctor's tonic, meant to fortify you, and how it's as useless as this pillow. The myths about pain, your womb unbalanced, your nerves overtaxed, making every touch a threat. You're wondering what consummation feels like, if it's quick or endless, if Charles knows more than you. His power from the drawing room now a physical force. You're craving escape. The laudanum vials we saw a fleeting temptation, but the door's locked, and you're trapped. The acted duty you can't refuse. Here's another chuckle. Why was the bed so big? Because it had to hold all your fears. You're smiling, but it's fleeting. Charles's hand grazes yours, and you're thinking of survival. You're also connecting the threads. The street's silence, the parlor's expectations, the doctor's myths they've led here, where physical pain is the wedding night's sharpest edge. Not just a moment, but a surrender, rooted in the law's claim we felt. You're remembering that wedding charm, a frail hope, and how it's like the pillow, a placebo against a reality shaped by ignorance. You're thinking of other brides' heiresses in mansions, maids in attics, their bodies, like yours, braced for the unknown, each pain a shared secret. Their fears a chorus of the dread we've carried since the chamber's first glow. As you ease onto the bed, Charles's shadow closer, the candle's flicker dims, and you're bracing for the pain. The physical truth of this night. Your body a stranger in a world that demands it perform. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about one act, it's about a society that left women's bodies unprotected, making the wedding night a physical trial, not a union, driven by myths and power. You're thinking of those bridal pillows, softening nothing, like laudanum's false peace, and how they reflect a world that dresses fear in love. You're wondering about the wife you'll be, if you'll endure or break, and the women who've faced this bed before, their strength unseen. The candle gutters, Charles's breath is near, and you're carrying this painful fear, ready to face the gossip that awaited its outcome. A cruel sting to follow the night. One last joke to ease U.S. forward. Why did the bride fear the dawn? Because it tattled louder than her pain. You're sinking into the bed, the curtain falling, as the chamber's hush deepens, with the physical fears of consummation heavy in your soul. You're ready to explore the gossip's cruel sting, the social scrutiny that judged the wedding night's end. You're slipping out of that shadowed bridal chamber, the echo of Charles's breath, and the bed's creak fading, and into the bustling morning bustle of a London tea room, where the air smells of scones and the sharp tang of brewed Darjeeling. Clinking teacups and soft laughter fill the space, but the glances of matrons in feathered hats are knives, dissecting you. It's the 1860s, and you're a Victorian newlywed, maybe 24. Your wedding ring glinting as you force a smile, the physical pain of last night's consummation still a dull ache. The fear we felt in that chamber has passed, but now you're facing a new trial. Gossip's cruel sting, the social scrutiny that judged the wedding night's outcome, turning your private ordeal into public sport. This is the court of whispers, and you're feeling its bite, sharp as the sugar tongs clicking nearby. The mainstream fact is that Victorian society closely scrutinized newlyweds, particularly brides, for signs of a successful wedding night, with gossip serving as a social enforcer, as noted in women's magazines and diaries from the 1860s. A pale face, a hesitant smile, or rumors of failure could spark whispers of frigidity or barrenness, threatening your reputation. You're sipping tea, the cup trembling, as Mrs. Langley, the matron from that parlor we visited, leans in, her question about your health laced with curiosity. The night's pain, the ignorance we carried from the street, and Charles's legal power we shuddered under are now fodder for judgment. Your worth as a wife measured by last night's unseen act. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some gossips used bridal teacups, delicate porcelain with hidden designs like hearts or doves that only appeared when hot tea was poured, a subtle nudge to pry into newlywed secrets. In the 1860s, china shops sold these as conversation starters for tea parties. You're eyeing your cup, wondering if it's one, and grinning it's like a Victorian lie detector. Sneakier than those bridal pillows we clutched in the chamber. You're half tempted to spill your tea to avoid the pattern, but Mrs. Langley's stare pins you. Her smile is probing as the doctor's myths we heard about your delicate body. Historians still argue whether gossip was a malicious tool to shame brides or a social ritual to enforce norms, with no clear intent in correspondence or etiquette guides. Some, citing scandal sheets, say it deliberately humiliated women, reinforcing submission. Others, noting community ties, argue it was a way to ensure marital stability, checking the success of unions like yours. You're stirring your tea, the spoon clinking too loud, and wondering if these whispers are meant to break you or bind you to Charles. The societal rules from the parlor, and the medical myths from the consulting room, now a chorus of judgment. The wedding night's pain we endured last night, a secret you can't share. Time for a quick joke. Why did the teacup blush? Because it heard more than the bride's vows. You're chuckling, but it's hushed. Mrs. Langley's raised eyebrow stifles it, and you're dodging her gaze. You're adjusting your shawl, its fringe fraying, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The tea room's a whirl of lace tablecloths and silver trays, with ladies in bustled gowns murmuring over cakes, their eyes darting like hawks. You're not in that chamber with its painful act or the drawing room's legal weight. You're in a public arena, where gossip's the judge. Your wedding night, meant to seal your marriage, is now a topic for scrutiny. Did you please Charles? Did you conceive? Were you dutiful? You're feeling the exposure. How a wince or a blush could spark rumors, like those we feared in the parlor, where society demanded perfection. The ignorance from the street, the myths from the doctor, they've left you defenseless. The pain we faced last night, a mark you can't hide from these prying eyes. Step closer to the table and notice the details. The cool porcelain of your cup, the faint hum of a violin from the corner, the way Mrs. Langley's fan flutters like a warning. This tea room's a courtroom, like those ladies' almanacs we sought for answers, but it's merciless, turning your body's truth into scandal. You're thinking of that bridal pillow, a frail comfort against pain, and how it's useless. Now, gossip stings sharper than Charles's touch. You're wondering why your night's outcome, success or struggle, is everyone's business. Their whispers echoing the law's claim we felt, where your body was his, not yours. You're craving silence, but the teacups clink, and you're exposed. The laudanum vials we saw tempting as a way to blur this shame, though you resist. Eliza's letter in mind. Here's another chuckle. Why was gossip so nosy? because it wanted to sleep in your bridal bed. You're smiling, but its strained a younger lady's giggle pulls you back, her eyes curious about your glow. You're also connecting the dots. The parlor's expectations, the street's ignorance, the doctor's myths, Charles's power they've led here. Where gossip's the wedding night's final judge, not just a moment but a verdict, like we feared trembling in the chamber. You're remembering those marriage manuals, vague as these whispers, and how they align with this scrutiny, demanding proof of your duty without caring for your pain. You're thinking of other brides' heiresses, shop girls, their nights dissected. Like yours, each whisper a shared wound, their fears a mirror to the dread we've carried since the locket's weight. As you set the teacup down, Mrs. Langley's questions pressing, you're aching to flee, the tea room's warmth now a trap. It's gossip a net you can't escape. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just chatter, it's a system, making the wedding night a public trial, where your body's performance is everyone's to judge, driven by rules and myths. You're thinking of those bridal teacups, revealing secrets like gossip, reveals your shame, and how they reflect a society that watches but doesn't help. You're wondering about the wife you'll be, if you'll weather these whispers or crack under their sting. And the women who've faced this table before, their courage buried in the clatter. The gaslight dims, the chatter swells, and you're carrying this cruel scrutiny, ready to probe the religious guilt that deepened the night's fear. A spiritual weight as heavy as the gossip's lash. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the matrons love tea parties? Because they brewed rumors faster than the kettle. You're rising from the table, the teacup left behind, as the tea room's buzz fades, with gossip's cruel sting heavy in your soul. You're ready to explore the religious guilt that haunted the wedding night, a divine shadow on your fears. You're kneeling in the cool stone nave of a London church, the air heavy with the scent of incense and wax. As candlelight flickers across stained glass, saints gazing down, the organ's low hum vibrates through the pews, and you're a Victorian, newlywed, maybe 24, your hands clasped tightly in prayer. The tea room's gossip still stinging like a fresh wound. The ache from last night's wedding consummation lingers, but it's the weight of sin, real or imagined, that presses harder. The church's teachings casting a shadow over the bridal bed we trembled in. You're here to probe the religious guilt that deepened Victorian bride's wedding night fears. How faith turned intimacy into a moral minefield, making you question every touch. This is the divine judgment's grip, and you're feeling its chill. Heavy as the crucifix looming above, the mainstream fact is that the Victorian Church, particularly the Church of England, heavily influenced attitudes toward sex, preaching that it was solely for procreation within marriage and fraught with sin if driven by pleasure. As outlined in sermons and texts like the Book of Common Prayer 1662, still used in the 1860s. Brides were taught to approach the wedding night with purity and restraint. Any desire or discomfort seen as a moral failing. You're whispering a prayer, asking forgiveness for last night's pain, or was it pleasure? And you're trembling. The ignorance we faced on that foggy street and the physical fears we endured in the chamber, now layered with guilt. The church's voice echoing the parlor's rules that demanded your submission. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides carried prayer tokens, small ivory discs engraved with crosses, to clutch during the wedding night for spiritual protection against carnal sin. In the 1860s, church gift shops sold these, slipped into bridal trousseaux. You're fingering one in your pocket, its edges smooth, and grinning. It's like a Victorian lucky charm, holier than those bridal teacups we saw at the tea party. You're half tempted to grip it now, hoping it absolves the confusion of Charles's touch. But the priest's distant chant about chastity pulls you back. the guilt as sharp as the gossip sting we fled. Historians still argue whether religious guilt was a deliberate tool to control women's sexuality, or a cultural byproduct of Victorian piety, with no clear intent in sermons or diaries. Some, citing ecclesiastical writings, say the church enforced guilt to ensure marital fidelity and procreation. Others, noting personal accounts, argue it reflected broader anxieties about morality, burdening brides with shame regardless of intent. You're bowing your head, the pews wood hard against your knees, and wondering if this guilt is God's will or man's. The societal pressures from the parlor, the medical myths from the doctor, and Charles's power we felt now sanctified by faith, making last night's act a sin you can't confess. Time for a quick joke. Why did the prayer token shine? Because it outglowed your wedding night sins. You're chuckling, but its hush the organ's swell drowns it, and you're wary of a matron's glance nearby. You're shifting, the prayer book slipping, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The church is solemn, with high arches, pews of polished oak, and a marble altar gleaming under candles. You're not in that tea room with its gossiping matrons or the bridal chamber's painful act. You're in a sacred space, where guilt is the sermon's pulse. You're praying for purity, but last night's memory Charles's weight, the pain we faced. Maybe a fleeting warmth feels like a betrayal of God's plan, the church's rules mirroring the law's claim. We shuddered under, demanding your body serve procreation, not passion. You're feeling the shame, how the act, meant to be holy, feels tainted. The ignorance from the street leaving you blind to what's right. The doctor's myths about your delicate body adding sin to suffering. Step closer to the altar and notice the details. The cool stone under your fingers, the faint rustle of hymnals, the way the candlelight makes the saint's eyes seem to judge. This nave is a refuge, like those bridal pillows we clutched for comfort. But it's also a courtroom, where your soul's on trial. You're thinking of that tea room's scrutiny, how gossip judged your night's success, and how the church judges your heart, preaching restraint while Charles's rights, backed by law, demanded action. You're wondering why desire's a sin, why pain's your fault. The prayer token as useless as the doctor's tonic we scoffed at. The laudanum vials we saw tempting as a way to numb this guilt. Though Eliza's letter urges you to resist, you're craving absolution. But the church offers only rules, each prayer a reminder of your fall. Here's another chuckle. Why was the sermon so stern? Because it caught you blushing in the dark. You're smiling, but it's fleeting. The matron's cough pulls you back, and you're thinking of judgment. You're also connecting the dots. The parlor's expectations, the street's ignorance, the doctor's myths, Charles's power, the tea room's gossip they've led here, where religious guilt is the wedding night's final lash. Not just an act, but a moral test, like we feared in the chamber. You're remembering those marriage manuals, vague as the church's code, and how they align with this shame, teaching duty over desire. You're thinking of other brides' pious daughters, reluctant wives, their wedding nights haunted like yours, each prayer a shared plea. Their fears a mirror to the dread we've carried since the locket's first weight. As you rise from the pew, the priest's chant fading, you're aching for peace. The church's stone walls now a cage, its guilt a chain you can't break. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just faith, it's control, making the wedding night a spiritual trial, where your body's a battleground for sin, driven by rules, myths, and law. You're thinking of those prayer tokens, guarding nothing, like laudanum's false escape, and how they reflect a society that burdens women with shame over love. You're wondering about the wife you'll be, if you'll carry this guilt or find a way to shed it, and the women who've knelt here before, their strength unspoken. The candles dim, the nave empties, and you're carrying this heavy guilt, ready to discover the secret sisterhood that whispered against this dread. A quiet defiance in the dark. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did guilt love the church? Because it preached louder than your heart. You're slipping from the pew, the prayer token left behind, as the church's hush deepens. With religious guilt heavy in your soul, you're ready to explore the secret sisterhood's whispers. The women who fought the wedding night's fear. You're nestled in the cozy nook of a London ladies' sewing circle, the air soft with the scent of beeswax polish, and the faint lavender of sachets. Tucked into baskets of embroidery, a fire crackles in the hearth, casting a warm glow on needlework and teacups, and you're a Victorian newlywed, maybe 24. Your fingers threading a needle as you listen to hushed voices sharing secrets. The church's guilt still lingers from that pew, a weight on your heart after the wedding night's pain. We endured, but here, among these women, you're finding solace. You're here to discover the secret sisterhood's whispers, the hidden support Victorian brides offered each other to ease the fears of their wedding nights. A quiet defiance against society's rules and the church's shame. This is a haven of courage, and you're feeling its warmth, gentle as the stitches binding you together. The mainstream fact is that Victorian women often formed informal networks, like sewing circles or tea gatherings, to share advice and support about marriage and intimacy, as noted in diaries and women's magazines like the Lady's Own paper from the 1860s. While society, as we saw in the parlor, demanded silence, these spaces allowed you to exchange coded tips on surviving the wedding night, managing pain, or navigating husband's demands safe from gossip sting we faced at the tea room. You're listening to Eliza, a friend from the circle, whisper about a soothing balm for discomfort. Her eyes kind, and you're nodding, grateful for words that pierced the ignorance we stumbled through on that foggy street, a lifeline, where the church offered only guilt. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some women passed bridal letters, handwritten notes folded into embroidery patterns, with discreet advice on wedding night survival, like using pillows for comfort or timing intimacy to avoid pain. In the 1860s, these were swapped in sewing circles, hidden like contraband. You're picturing one tucked in your basket, its ink smudged, and grinning. It's like a Victorian DM, sneakier than those prayer tokens we clutched in the church. You're half tempted to unfold it now, eager for its wisdom, but Eliza's soft voice keeps you focused. The sisterhood's whispers a shield against the fears we've carried since that bridal chamber's dread. Historians still argue whether these networks were widespread or limited to close-knit groups, with no clear scope in personal accounts or social records. Some, citing diaries, say they were common, a vital resistance to the silence imposed by society and the church. Others, noting the era's isolation, argue they were rare, accessible only to those with trusted friends, leaving many brides alone. You're threading your needle, the fire's glow steady, and wondering if this circle's strength is a secret shared by thousands or a fragile gift. The societal rules from the parlor, the medical myths from the doctor, and Charles's power we faced now softened by these voices. The wedding night's pain we felt awound their helping heal. Time for a quick joke. Why did the bridal letter whisper? Because it knew more than the vicar. You're chuckling, but it's soft. The clink of a teacup stifles it, and you're wary of a new member's curious glance. You're leaning closer to Eliza, the needlework forgotten, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The sewing circles intimate, with cushioned chairs, a low table strewn with threads, and a teapot steaming gently. You're not in that church with its guilt-laden sermons, or the tea rooms gossiping matrons. You're in a sanctuary, where women defy the silence we've fought since the foggy streets' ignorance. Eliza's sharing a tip breathes slowly to ease tension while another, Clara, mentions a midwife's trick for easing the act. Their words coded but clear. A rebellion against the law's claim we shuddered under, and the myths we debunked in the doctor's office. You're feeling the relief. How these whispers unraveled the fear we faced in the chamber. The physical pain we endured last night, now a story you can share, not hide. Step closer to the fire and notice the details. The warm crackle of logs, the faint rustle of silk as Clara shifts, the way the lamp's light catches a bridal letter's folded edge in Eliza's hand. This nook's a refuge, like those ladies' almanacs we sought. But it's alive, a space where your voice matters. You're thinking of that tea room's scrutiny, how gossip judged your night, and how this circle judges no one, offering bomb recipes or words to soothe the church's guilt we prayed through. You're wondering about other women maids, heiresses whispering in circles like this. Their letters or tips a defiance of the parlor's rules and the doctor's lies. Their strength a thread in the tapestry of brides we've met, from the locket's first weight to the bed's painful truth. Here's another chuckle. Why was the sewing circle so secret? Because it's stitched more than just hems. You're smiling, but it's tender Clara's story of her own wedding night, painful but survived, pulls you back. You're also connecting the dots. The parlor's expectations, the street's silence, the doctor's myths, Charles's power, the gossip's sting, the church's guilt they've led here, where the sisterhood's whispers are the wedding night's quiet answer, not just an act but a shared survival, like we trembled through in the chamber. You're remembering those marriage manuals, vague as the church's code, and how these letters outshine them, teaching courage over fear. You're thinking of brides across London, their circles like yours, each whisper a rebellion, their fears a chorus we've carried, softened now by this fire's glow as you set the needle down. Eliza's hand brushing yours, you're finding strength, the drawing room's weight lifting, the sisterhood's whispers a balm for the night's wounds, physical and spiritual. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just support, it's resistance. A way for women to reclaim their bodies from a world that silenced them, making the wedding night less a trial through shared secrets. You're thinking of those bridal letters, hiding wisdom like laudanum hid pain, and how they reflect a society where women found cracks in the rules to survive. You're wondering about the wife you'll be, if you'll carry these whispers forward, and the women who've sown here before, their courage. A legacy. The fire dims, the circle's voices soften, and you're carrying this quiet defiance, ready to reflect on how these fears shaped Victorian society, a lasting echo of the night's dread. One last joke to ease us forward. Why did the sisterhood love secrets? Because they outsmarted the bedroom's shadows. You're rising, the letter tucked close, as the nook's glow fades, with the sisterhood's whispers heavy in your heart. You're ready to explore the legacy of bridal fears. There, mark on a world. You're perched on a velvet bench in a quiet London park, the air crisp with the scent of damp grass, and the distant tang of coal smoke from chimneys across the Thames. Dusk settles, softening the gaslight's glow, and you're a Victorian wife, maybe 25, your shawl loose as you hold a faded bridal letter from Eliza's sewing circle. Its whispered advice a lifeline through your wedding night's fears. The city's humtrams clanking, church bells tolling fades into a gentle murmur, and you're reflecting on the legacy of those fears. How the dread of Victorian brides shaped society's views on marriage, women, and intimacy. The chamber's pain, the church's guilt, and the sisterhood's courage linger, tying your story to a broader tapestry. This is the echo of a silent struggle, and you're feeling its weight, soft as the twilight but enduring as the bench beneath you. The mainstream fact is that the fears surrounding Victorian wedding nights, prevalent in the 1860s, influenced social norms and cultural narratives about marriage, as seen in literature and legal reforms like the Married Women's Property Act of 1870. Bride's dread, rooted in ignorance, myths, and power imbalances. We've traced, highlighted women's vulnerability, sparking slow changes, better education, divorce laws, feminist voices that gave later generations more agency. You're folding Eliza's letter, its ink faint, and you're seeing your fear, felt trembling in that chamber, as a thread in this shift, the pain we endured, the gossip we faced, and the whispers we shared pushing society to rethink its chains. From the parlor's rules to the law's grip we shuddered under. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian brides' fears inspired wedding night novels. Sensational stories sold in penny dreadfuls, with heroines fainting or fleeing their husbands' beds. In the 1870s, publishers churned these out, capitalizing on the dread we've carried. You're picturing one tucked in a newsstand, its cover lurid, and grinning. It's like a Victorian soap opera, juicier than those bridal letters we read in the sewing circle. You're half tempted to buy one for a laugh, but the letter's wisdom, urging courage, keeps you grounded. The park's calm, a reminder of the fears that fueled such tales. Their legacy more than fiction. Historians still argue whether bridal fears drove meaningful change or were overstated in cultural memory, with no clear consensus in diaries or reformist texts. Some, citing early feminist tracts, say they galvanized women's rights, exposing marriage's inequities. Others, noting persistent patriarchy, argue they were a minor note, overshadowed by broader issues like suffrage. You're gazing at the Thames, its ripples like time, and wondering if your dread, from the chamber's bed to the tea room's gossip, changed anything, or if it's just a whisper in history, the ignorance from the street, the myths from the doctor, and the guilt from the church we prayed through, a quiet cry against a louder world. Time for a quick joke. Why did the wedding night novel sell? Because it's scared better than a ghost. You're chuckling, but its soft a pigeon's flutter drowns it. And you're wary of a lamplighter's passing shadow. You're settling deeper on the bench, the letter crinkling, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene, the park serene, with bare trees silhouetted against the dusk. A gas lamp glowing like a memory, its light softer than the tea room's glare. You're not in that sewing circle with its brave whispers or the church's guilt-laden pews. You're in a space of reflection, where bridal fears feel both personal and vast. Your wedding night, a trial of pain we faced, wasn't just yours, it was a generation's, shaping stories, laws, even the way love was written. From Rossetti's poems we mused over to novels that bared the dread. You're feeling the legacy, how your fear, tied to the parlor's rules and Charles's power we endured, nudged society to see women's pain, not just their purity, a shift as slow as the river's flow. Step closer to the lamp and notice the details, the cool iron under your fingers, the faint rustle of leaves skittering past, the way Eliza's letter feels like a bridge to yesterday. This park's a vantage point, like those bridal teacups revealing secrets, but it's timeless, weaving your story into history's fabric. You're thinking of that gossip sting, how it judged your night, and how it sparked tales that questioned such scrutiny, or the sisterhood's letters, defying the silence we broke, the legacies in the laws that gave you rights, the books that gave you voice, even the women who followed, less afraid because you trembled. You're wondering about other bridesmaids, Ladies, their fears like yours. Their courage shaping a world where marriage might mean choice, not chains. A ripple from the chamber's dread to today's light. Here's another chuckle. Why did bridal fears last? Because they wrote louder than the vows. You're smiling, but it's tender. The lamp's glow feels like hope, a light for tomorrow. You're also connecting the threads. The parlor's expectations, the street's ignorance, the doctor's myths, Charles's power, the gossip, the guilt, the sisterhood they've led here, where bridal fears left a mark, from novels to reforms, a legacy of pain turned to progress. You're remembering those laudanum vials, numbing other dreads, and how your fight, like Eliz's, outshone them, a defiance that echoes in freer lives. You're thinking of women who followed, their wedding nights less shadowed, their stories built on yours, each fear a seed for change. Now, let's let the world ease, the edges softening like a whispered lullaby. You're still on that bench, the park's dusk wrapping you in a gentle embrace, the Thames ripples fading into a silver hush. Eliza's letter rests light in your hands, its words of courage a warm glow. The wedding night's fears dissolving like mist under stars. You've walked through chambers and churches, carried pain, guilt, and whispers, and that's enough. Picture a quiet garden, its roses swaying in moonlight, where your dread, Eliza's strength, and countless brides' hopes drift like petals on a breeze. The rules, the myths, the shadows, they're gone, leaving only peace, a world cradling you close. Let the dusk deepen, let the silence hold you. Your heart's full, your eyes heavy, and the night's ready to weave you into its dreams. Sleep now, sweet listener, and rest in the glow of stories that endure, soft as the starlight. Above,